Today we are going to be taking a detailed look at the new game that left early access yesterday on August 6, 2019, and that is Cliff Empire, a city builder simulation strategy game made by the developer and publisher Lion Shade. This game is available for sale on Steam for $11.99 USD. Now, before we go any further, I want to make a few things clear. Number one, I haven't received any sponsorships or benefits for this review, and I even purchased the copy myself. And number two, if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button, like the video, and tap the notification bell so you'll never miss one again. Now, let's go ahead and review Cliff Empire. So when reviewing a video game, especially one that falls into a category that has been around for so long, such as the city builder and simulation category, I think it's important to denote what they do differently than anything else that is currently on the market. Mechanically and feature-wise, we don't see a whole lot of different mechanics introduced inside of Cliff Empire that we haven't seen from other city builder and simulation games. But what is different is the atmosphere, the environment, and the setting. That is where Cliff Empire shines and is the most intriguing and interesting. The one thing I can say that they do differently is the fact that you're building such a big city on such a small scale, because you only have a little cliff to put this huge city. And I think it makes the game a little bit different in that regard. But unfortunately, other than that, there's just not a whole lot of new and fresh mechanics that we haven't seen from other city simulators. But that doesn't mean it's a bad game. Just because a game uses industry standard mechanics and features doesn't mean it's done well, is visually pleasing, and provides a good gaming experience, especially if it's priced accordingly. Now, when we pop open the hood of Cliff Empire and take a harder look at everything that it brings to the table, there's a lot to like, but there's also a lot to not be fond of. My first complaint, and probably one of the most common complaints that there will be with this game, is the ability to not move buildings after being placed. Now, the way it works is you place a building down, and obviously that costs money and resources, and your drones will take the resources from either the trading depot or the storage facility and bring them over to the newly placed building to start constructing it. Now, get it, once you have bought the building and put materials in it, it wouldn't make realistic sense to be able to move it. However, I think it provides a much better gaming experience if you're able to do that. At least if you can do it before any materials are put into the construction site. Because the area that you're building is so small, you want to make use of every little bit of space. And when you misclick and you put it one tile too far, having to click the building, hit demolish, and lose resources from that, and then go back in the UI, find the building again, and replace it is just monotonous, when instead you should just be able to click and drag the building. Now, with that said, the game does a good job of highlighting of how big the building is going to be, being able to rotate it, and having a good idea of where to put things before you actually place it. The next thing to talk about are the different camera options, and they provide us with three good camera modes. First, you get the over-the-top 3D camera mode, then you get the orthographic camera mode, and then my personal favorite, you get the free camera for walking around the city. Now, all three of these camera modes have their own use and all work perfectly. The free camera mode provides no clipping, so you can zip around without any issues and get a real hard look at everything in your city. But I do have one gripe with the camera mode, specifically with the free camera option. We should be able to change elevation in this camera mode. It is super frustrating only to be able to go left and right, forwards and backwards, and not up and down. And the reason why I say this is because you build on multiple cliffs. So being able to see all the cliffs from a top-down view would be very interesting to me, and also would help putting down bridges a little bit easier instead of having to use the picture-in-picture mode that they give us. The next topic is difficulty, and this is something I think is super important for any strategy or simulation game, because a lot of people that come into these games have a wide range of skill level. You have the master strategy game players that basically understand both the micro and macro of the game and really get into the numbers, and so a higher difficulty setting is required in order to provide a decent gaming experience. A newer player that gets into these games doesn't want to get into that much detail and just wants to kind of simply walk through the game. So I think in general, when I opened up the game and followed the tutorial, it was right in the middle of that, which is where it needs to be. You were able to walk through the tutorial, understand the mechanics. I think the tutorial did a good job of explaining the UI and how to navigate through it, and that the game mechanics kind of fell in place for you. However, if you're not careful, you could easily mismatch mismanage your city and send it into a stall. And at least to my knowledge, with my short time playing the game, there is a point of no return that if your city stalls, you are dead in the water and the save is done. So this resorts to you save scumming. But I'm just not a huge fan of having to save scum and have to like subconsciously, oh, I need to save every 5 minutes, or oh, it needs to auto save every 5 minutes. And if this happens, I can just revert back. I find more fun in a game whenever I make a mistake and have to recover from it than instead of making a mistake and being punished from it, if that makes sense. So that is definitely something in this game that you need to note before buying it. It can be a good thing, it could be a bad thing depending on your preference. Some people like to be punished. Okay, that sounds weird, but you know what I mean. Some people like the hardcoreness of like, if you do a mistake, you should be absolutely punished and have to restart or reload your save and reload your progress. And I get that outlook, but I think for a game mechanic, having to save scum is just cheesy unless there's an Iron Man mode, and then that would be something to consider, but there isn't. So it's like the game is opening you up to that possibility of having to reload your save. Okay, enough about that. The other thing on the difficulty and the customization options that I want to talk about is the lack thereof. There's only one difficulty, and it's the base difficulty you get when you open the game. There are no settings to really turn on and off features. There's a few different game modes that play a little bit different, but in general, you can't say, hey, let's make this harder, or hey, let's disable this to kind of make the experience the way I want to play it, which I think with today's strategy and simulation games is a must. Moving on to another important category for any game is the graphics, the sound, and of course the UI. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the UI since we just talked about mechanics and this kind of flows into that. The UI was okay. I think it looked ugly personally. It's just not visually appealing, especially when you compare it to what I think are the awesome graphics. But although the UI wasn't visually appealing, it worked and it flows pretty nicely, and I think everything was in the right place. It could use a little bit of work, but I'm not going to harp on it too much besides the look of it. But pretty much every button, you could hover over it or click it and it will tell you exactly what that thing did or what that item or what that information meant to you. And you didn't have to flip through 30 different menus to get to somewhere. However, I think in comparison to that art style that we see, it's just not up to par and needs work. So since we talked about it, let's go ahead and talk about the graphics of the game. I personally really enjoyed the art style of the game. You can tell that the developers actually made this game and that they provided their own art and didn't use some pre-made asset, and it just looks beautiful and really flows with the setting of the post-apocalypse or the nuclear fallout that they have created for the story of this game. And when you go in free mode, you can really see the details. Similar to Anno 1800, how you could go down and really see the details, you could do the same thing here. And I think that's an A+ and just adds to the extra immersion that you get when playing this game. So good job, developers, on that. I really love the art. Leading with the good, I've got to end with the bad, and that is the sound. Unfortunately, the sound in this game is just subpar. You get music, which I turn off obviously for my videos, but the only other sound you get is pretty much the atmosphere, environmental sound, some of the voice notifications, and then a few of the moving parts within the city have sound. But if you walk around in free mode, you pretty much hear nothing. And that was kind of like unimmersive compared to the graphics. So I was a little disappointed that we didn't, really get to hear the sounds of the city and sounds of people moving and bustling about as your city grew. There's really not a good thing to say about the sound, to be honest. That's just my personal opinion. So since I think the graphics are absolutely amazing, given the scope of the game and the studio that has made it, one gripe that I do have is the lack of graphic settings. Kind of similar to the lack of difficulty settings. We're just not given a lot of options on toning down or bumping up the graphics, which I think any video game, especially a PC game, should have. So hopefully they will consider that and add more options for us in the future, because not being able to adjust terrain detail, like all of that, it just seemed weird that it wasn't in the game. Now let's talk about the bugs of the game. This game is one of the few that comes out of early access, makes it to a full launch, and seems to be in a very good state. So props to you devs for actually accomplishing something that a lot of dev teams don't do. Instead, they stay in early access for 12 years. But because I didn't find any bugs, I did navigate to the Steam review section to see if anybody else was reporting anything. The only thing that I really noticed was a few reports about launching issues, but I didn't have any problem loading up the game. And so my guess is it's more on the user end for those reports. And then lastly, let's talk about what's in store for the future of the game, because that's also important when you buy a game, is how is it going to change and what content is expected in the future when you do buy it. Unfortunately, there hasn't been given a lot of information about the future of this game, although I was able to pull out a roadmap that was announced when this first game went to early access, and the only features that are left to be added seems like a new map, or it's called an Ice Megalopolis, and they're going to allow you to trade between the current setting and then that new setting. So distant trading is a feature that they will be adding in the future. I'm not sure if that's been nixed because it was supposed to make it to this update, I believe, but that could be something to be excited for in the future of this game. And it also seems like the updates were pretty regular throughout. There was an update that would happen about every 1 to 2 weeks for the game. So the devs were always quick with updates and keeping their users informed, which is also a good thing for the future of the game. So my official verdict on whether this game is worth buying or not is yes, but it comes with some caveats. So currently my biggest concern with the game is its long-term playability, especially when compared to other games in the genre that were even released just this year, such as Anno 1800, a game where it takes large amounts of hours to reach in-game content, and the start of every playthrough is very different. I don't think you get that with Cliff Empire. I think the start is going to be relatively the same, and it's very quick to get to the in-game content. So my feelings and thoughts are that after your first complete playthrough of Cliff Empire, maybe the second playthrough, it's just going to be easy to put it down and move on. So I think it's going to be one of those games, you play it a couple times, it's a really pleasurable experience, and you'll only come back with major updates. Now, those are very big concerns, especially when deciding to buy a game. But I think the devs priced it accordingly, and they knew that going in. I mean, the game is only $11.99 USD. Something like Anno is $60 on Uplay. So, I mean, you're getting a game for $12 that you can easily put 24 to 50 hours in, which I think is well worth the buy, and that is why that was my final verdict. But that concludes today's review of Cliff Empire by Lion Shade. I hope you guys found this informative, and if you did, be sure to like the video because it lets me know that I did a good job, as well as subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can catch the next review on the next new release.